Nobody expected this to circle back again like this, yet here we are, because what just unfolded isn't just another celebrity win, it's the kind of moment that flips an entire narrative overnight and leaves everyone doubting what they thought they knew. The moment Michael B. Jordan lifted that Oscar high in air, it wasn't merely applause echoing across the room, it was the internet rewinding, replaying every rumor, every breakup headline, every whisper following his split from Harvey story, and suddenly that quiet breakup. It doesn't feel quiet anymore in today's narrative shift. Now unfolding old interviews are now being clipped and reposted, alleged conversations are resurfacing again, and there's one claim, one statement that's spreading like wildfire and changing how everyone sees this story. People are saying Lori might have doubted him directly to his face. He wouldn't reach this level allegedly, and if that's even remotely true, then what we just witnessed wasn't just a career milestone, it was pure response, a silent one but louder than anything he could ever say. And now internet is in full meltdown mode because people are losing their minds again. They are questioning her, comparing timelines and dragging old rumors back into spotlight, even pulling Damson Idris into the chaos like this is some kind of unfinished story that never really ended still. But here's the moment that should make you pause. What if everything we were told back then wasn't the full truth? Because the deeper people dig, the messier this story becomes, and if what's emerging right now keeps surfacing and coming out, the situation keeps getting worse publicly again, it'll become a total rewrite of everything. The moment Michael B. Jordan raised that Oscar, it wasn't just a victory, it felt like verdict final, because internet didn't just celebrate him either, it turned around and put his past on trial, and at the center of it all, Harvey. But here's where things feel uncomfortable, because this story didn't begin at the Oscars, it began long before that, back when everything between them looked perfect on the surface. The photos, the vacations, the energy, they weren't merely a couple, they were that couple, the kind people assumed would last. And that's exactly why the breakup hit the way it did, because when it happened it didn't come with a clear explanation, no joint statement, no detailed interviews, no closure, just silence, and that silence got filled quickly. Rumors started spreading before facts ever had a chance. Whispers that Michael was too serious, talk that he was ready for marriage too soon, claims that Harvey wasn't in same place emotionally. At first it seemed simple, a timing issue, two people in separate phases, but then the narrative shifted because suddenly new rumors started circulating, stories painting a completely different picture again, stories suggesting Michael might not have been fully disconnected from his past, especially his ex. And once that idea entered the conversation, everything got messy, because now it wasn't just about compatibility, it was pure trust, and trust changes everything. Then came the moment that pushed things over the edge. Lisa Ray McCoy stepped in publicly, and she didn't just comment, she added fuel. She claimed that Harvey wasn't avoiding commitment, that she actually wanted something serious, but allegedly discovered right before things could get deeper that Michael still had ties with his ex. That revelation, it flipped the narrative instantly, because now people started seeing things completely differently and questioning everything they believed about the situation again, like maybe he was the reason everything fell apart. And here's the part that made things even more intense, Michael didn't respond, not once, no denial, no explanation, no defense, just silence. And in that moment silence didn't protect him, it cost him, because internet filled in the blanks again, and when the internet fills in blanks it rarely gives you the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, Harvey's side of the story didn't need statements, it moved subtly, strategically, because right around that same time everything was unfolding behind the scenes while the public had no idea what was happening. Love yourself, thank God for what didn't happen on the surface, motivational, but online people read between lines differently. They saw it as confirmation, as validation, as a quiet way of saying she made the right decision. And just like that, the public perception shifted. Michael became the question mark, Lori became the one who walked away from something that was right. But here's where it gets deeper, because while all of that was happening publicly, privately there were things unfolding behind the scenes that nobody outside really understood. No messy interviews, no emotional posts, no attempts to correct the narrative. He just worked locked in on projects, training, building and grinding every single day. It doesn't look powerful at first, it looks like absence, but absence has a way of aging differently over time, because at first it feels like nothing, but later it starts to look intentional and even powerful in hindsight when people revisit the story again. And now after the Oscar, that choice is being reevaluated, because success changes how people interpret the past, and internet perception, it flipped overnight. Now people are revisiting everything. That too serious label now being called maturity, those rumors about his ex now being questioned instead of accepted, those subtle posts from Law's side now being analyzed like strategic moves instead of support. Because when someone wins at that level, people start asking different questions, not what went wrong but who was right. And then came comparisons, because while Michael was standing on that stage, Damson Idris, who had been linked to Lori, got pulled into the conversation, not by him either, not by her, but by the internet. And commentary, relentless, wrong choice, downgrade, she bet on the wrong one. Those phrases started trending almost immediately, and whether fair or not they stuck, because timing is everything, and the timing of Michael's win made everything look different. It didn't just feel like success, it felt like proof that he didn't need to respond, proof that he didn't need to defend himself, proof that whatever narrative was built around him didn't define him. But here's where things take another turn, because according to whispers now circulating again, there may have been a moment right before the breakup where everything shifted, a conversation, private, unconfirmed, but repeated enough that people can't ignore it. The claim that Harvey allegedly told Michael something that people now replaying over and over. You're not there yet. At the time, if true, it might have sounded like honesty, even realism, but now with an Oscar in his hands it sounds like doubt. And the internet loves a story about doubt being proven wrong, because it turns success into something bigger, something personal, something emotional. And that's exactly what's happening now, because this doesn't feel like just a win. It seems like a response, a quiet one, but louder than anything he could have said back then. Meanwhile, Laurie remains quiet. No direct response, no addressing the comparisons, no stepping into the chaos. But her silence is being read very differently now because when the narrative flips, silence doesn't protect you the same way. It invites speculation, and speculation is growing because people aren't just asking what happened anymore. They are asking what really happened behind the scenes, behind the rumors, behind the narratives that were pushed when the breakup first happened. And here's the unsettling part. Since while everyone is focused on Michael's glow up, there are whispers, quiet but persistent, that the story we are seeing now is incomplete, that there are details still missing, still hidden, still waiting to surface. And if those details come out, this entire narrative could flip again. Since right now it looks like a comeback story. But what if it's only one side of the truth? And if that's the case, then what comes next might change everything all over again. The moment the internet crowned Michael B. Jordan the winner of this entire situation, that's when things got dangerous. Since stories like this, they don't stay one-sided for long. And just when it felt like the narrative had settled, like everyone had decided who was right, who was wrong, and who came out on top, everything shifted again. It started quietly. A post not from Michael, not from Laurie Harvey, from someone who wasn't even supposed to be part of the story. A stylist, someone who had allegedly worked around both of them during that time. No long caption, no explanation, just one sentence. "You'll really think you know what happened." That was it. But it was enough. Since within minutes, people started digging. Who is this? When were they around them? What do they know? And then came the follow-up. Deleted almost instantly, but not before screenshots spread everywhere. "Everything ain't what it looked like." Trust me, that line, it cracked the narrative wide open again. Since now, for the first time since the Oscars, people started questioning the comeback story itself. What if Michael wasn't the only one misunderstood? What if Laurie's silence wasn't guilt? What if it was protection? That question alone changed the energy because now instead of one clean storyline, we had two and they didn't match. Then came the resurfacing old clips, old interviews, old moments people ignored the first time around. Like that one interview where Michael hesitated just slightly when asked about relationships. At the time it looked like shyness. Now people are calling it discomfort. Or that red carpet moment where Laurie smiled but didn't lean in, didn't match his energy, didn't look fully present. Back then it was overlooked. Now it's being replayed like evidence because perception changes everything. And right now perception is unstable. Then came the biggest twist yet. Alleged messages not between Michael and Laurie, between Laurie and someone else. Not romantic, not explicit, but strategic discussions about timing, about appearances, about how things look publicly. One line in particular has people spiraling. "We can't let this turn into a story before it needs to." That sentence. It hit different. Since now people aren't just asking what happened emotionally. They are asking what was managed, what was controlled, what was possibly curated for the public. And if that's true, then this wasn't just a relationship, it was a narrative. And narratives can be manipulated. Then came the confrontation rumor, not confirmed, but spreading fast enough that people are treating it like a missing piece. According to these whispers, the real tension didn't come from cheating or outside involvement. It came from control, from disagreements about how public their relationship should be, how it should be presented, how it should evolve. And at one point, allegedly, Laurie said something that's now being repeated everywhere. "I'm not building my life around someone else's timeline." That line, it reframed everything. Since now, instead of her being seen as someone who walked away from something good, she's being seen as someone who refused to be rushed. And that's a completely different story. Meanwhile, Michael's side, still silent, still controlled, still focused. But that silence is starting to feel different now because at first it looked like strength. Then it looked like strategy. Now some people are starting to ask if it's selective. Since silence doesn't always mean innocence. Sometimes it means choosing which parts of the story get told and which parts don't. Then came the industry reactions. Subtle but sharp. A producer posted timing ain't the problem. Alignment is another, insider commented. Two people can both be right and still be wrong for each other. Those lines didn't pick sides, but they added complexity because now the story isn't about one person winning. It's about two people who might have been moving in completely different directions at the same time. And that's harder to simplify. Then came the Damson angle again. Dams and Idris was pulled back into the conversation not by anything he did, but by what people were saying that Laurie chose wrong, that she downgraded, that she missed her chance. But now that narrative is being challenged because some are pointing out that comparing people like that misses the entire point. That maybe this was never about choosing better. It was about choosing differently. And that difference is what ended things. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Since now there are whispers, quiet but persistent, that the breakup wasn't just emotional. It was timed. That both sides knew it was coming. That both sides had already started separating before the public ever knew. And that what we saw was just the final version. If that's true, then everything changes because now this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about decisions, calculated ones. And that makes it harder to assign blame. Since when something is planned, even partially, it's not betrayal, it's strategy. But here's the twist nobody can ignore. Since now there are whispers, quiet but persistent, that the breakup wasn't just emotional. It was timed. That both sides knew it was coming. That both sides had already started separating before the public ever knew. And that what we saw was just the final version. If that's true, then everything changes because now this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about decisions, calculated ones. And that makes it harder to assign blame. Since when something is planned, even partially, it's not betrayal, it's strategy. But here's the twist nobody can ignore. Ask the most dangerous question of all. What exactly is he protecting? Since protection only matters when there's something worth hiding. And that idea, it spread like wildfire. Then he added something else. Something that didn't sound angry, didn't sound bitter, but sounded final. Not everything that ends is because someone did something wrong. But not everything that ends is clean either. That sentence, it confused people because it didn't confirm guilt. But it didn't deny complications either. It lived in the middle. And the middle is where the truth usually hides. Meanwhile, Lori didn't stay quiet this time. Not completely because just hours after that clip started circulating, she posted something that looked simple but felt loaded. A photo, no caption, just her composed, calm, unbothered on the surface. But in the comments chaos, people weren't complimenting. They were questioning. You fumbled. He leveled up. Say something. And for a moment, it looked like she might ignore it until she didn't. One reply, just one. Y'all don't know the half. That was it. But it changed everything because now we had two narratives. Michael saying there were things he chose not to expose. Lori saying there were things people didn't know. And those two statements, they don't cancel each other out. They collide. And when narratives collide, something breaks. Then came the leak that nobody saw coming. Not messages, not audio, a timeline. A detailed breakdown posted by an anonymous account claiming to have direct knowledge of how things unfolded behind the scenes, dates, events, overlaps, and one claim that immediately became the center of attention that the relationship didn't end when people thought it did. That emotionally. It had already been over weeks before the public found out. And during that time, things weren't as clear as they seemed. That claim alone reframed everything. Because if it's true, then those public appearances near the end weren't real-time reflections of a relationship at all. They were performances. And that thought alone left people unsettled, because nobody enjoys realizing they might have been watching something staged instead of real life. Then came reactions from inside the industry. Not loud, but sharp and intentional. A director dropped a comment saying, "Sometimes the strongest move is not telling your side." Another insider added, "People want villains. Real life rarely gives you one." And just like that, the conversation shifted again, because now people weren't obsessing over who was wrong, they were considering something more uncomfortable, that both sides might have been protecting something private, messy, and impossible to translate into public drama. And that's where things turned from blame into curiosity. Because curiosity keeps stories alive far longer than conflict ever does. Then the Damson Idris angle resurfaced again, not because of anything he did, but because speculation dragged him back in. People started questioning timelines, connections, and what ifs. But the truth is simple. There's no confirmation, no proof, just proximity. And in the world of social media, proximity alone is enough to build an entire theory. Meanwhile, Michael's presence stayed consistent. Public appearances, interviews, controlled reflections. Always careful, never reactive, never slipping into accusation. And that consistency is exactly what strengthened his narrative, because while others speculated, he stayed grounded. But Lori's energy felt completely different. Not chaotic, not defensive, just distant, like someone carrying answers they've chosen not to give. And that distance got interpreted in 100 different ways. Some called it strength, others called it avoidance, but nobody could call it clarity. And that lack of clarity is exactly what kept this story alive. Because if everything had been explained, it would have ended. But it hasn't. And that's the key point. Even now, with all the rumors, reactions, and shifting angles, there's still something missing. Something unsaid, something both sides keep circling but never fully confronting. And that's where this stops being just a breakup story and starts becoming something else entirely, a study in perception itself. Because what's unfolding isn't just two people moving on, it's two narratives growing in opposite directions. One built on silence and success, the other built on mystery and restraint. And neither feels complete. Because the real truth doesn't live in posts, interviews, or leaked timelines. It sits in the gaps, in conversations we never heard, moments we never saw, and decisions made long before the public ever got involved. That's exactly why this story refuses to die. Unresolved stories don't end. They linger, they shift, they resurface in waves. And right now, we're not at closure. We're in that strange middle phase where everything looks calm on the surface, but underneath, something is still moving. Because if Hollywood proves anything, it's this: the quietest stories often end the loudest. And if you've followed this far, you already know this isn't just another celebrity breakup narrative. It's one of those rare moments that keeps evolving, keeps twisting, keeps revealing new angles when nobody expects it. Even now, with everything said and unsaid, there are still questions hanging in the air that no one can fully answer. So the real question becomes, do you think Michael handled it right by staying silent, or was that silence hiding something deeper? Do you think Laurie knows more than she's saying, or is she being pulled into a story she never even created? And that line, "You're not there yet," was it real, or just another invention the internet refused to let go of? Drop your thoughts, because this conversation isn't slowing down anytime soon. And if you're not paying attention, you're already behind what comes next. Stay tuned, stay alert, because this story is far from over.